I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but the deal is off. Actually, everything is off. Your company, your reputation, and your future in this city. It's all gone. Adrian Thorne, a man whose name was synonymous with power and billions, didn't even look at the $500 million contract as he tore it into tiny white flakes. The paper drifted to the floor like snow, landing in the spilled soup at his feet. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We bring you the most emotional and life-changing stories every single week, and you don't want to miss our next upload. Like this video if you believe that character is more important than money. Now let's go back to the beginning. Mr. Sterling, a man who had spent 3 years begging for this partnership, felt the blood drain from his face. But Adrian, it was just a mistake. She's just a waitress. A clumsy, pregnant girl who shouldn't even be working in a place this nice. Why would you throw away a $500 million merger over her? Adrian stepped closer, his shadow looming over Sterling. His voice was a cold, deadly whisper that made the entire restaurant go silent. You see a nobody in a uniform, Sterling. I see a human being. And more importantly, I finally see you. You spent months pretending to be a man of integrity to get my money, but it only took one bowl of soup to show me you're a monster. My mother was a waitress. My sister was a waitress. And today this nobody just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life, partnering with a man who has no soul. How did a simple lunch meeting turn into the biggest financial disaster in Mr. Sterling's life? And who was the mysterious waitress whose life was about to change forever? Stay tuned because today's story is a powerful lesson in why you should never look down on anyone, because you never know who is watching from the next table. Adrian Thorne was not your typical billionaire. At 38 he sat at the top of an empire that spanned 3 continents. He had the private jets, the mansions, and the influence to change laws with a single phone call. But Adrian was also a man haunted by his past. He remembered the smell of dishwater on his mother's hands. He remembered the way she would come home after a 16-hour shift, her feet swollen and her spirit crushed by customers who treated her like she was invisible. That was why Adrian had a rule. Before he signed any major deal, he tested the heart of his partner. He didn't care about their bank balance. He cared about how they treated the people who couldn't do anything for them. One Tuesday morning, Adrian sat in his glass-walled office, looking at a file. The name on the folder was Sterling Industries. The deal was worth $500 million. It would be the largest merger of the year. His lawyer Marcus walked in. Adrian, the reservations are set for 1 p.m. at the Gilded Lily. Sterling is already calling my office every 10 minutes. He's anxious to sign. Adrian spun his chair around, a small knowing smile on his face. He's anxious for the money, Marcus. But is he a man of character? That's what I need to know. Adrian stood up and walked to his private wardrobe. Instead of putting on his $3,000 Italian silk suit, he reached for a plain, slightly faded navy blue polo shirt and a pair of ordinary khakis. He took off his luxury watch and replaced it with a simple plastic one. He even ruffled his hair to look a bit tired, like a man who had just finished a long day of office work. Marcus sighed. The common man, test again, Adrian? Sterling is going to be looking for a billionaire. Exactly, Adrian replied. I'm going to arrive 45 minutes early. I'll sit at a small table near the entrance, away from the VIP section. I want to see how Mr. Sterling enters a room when he thinks the big boss hasn't arrived yet. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Elena was struggling to tie her apron. Her hands were shaking. She was 7 months pregnant, and the weight of her belly made her back ache with a dull, constant throb. Elena was 24 years old. She had a degree in social work, but after her husband vanished when he found out she was pregnant, and her mother fell ill with a respiratory condition, Elena had been forced to take every shift she could get at the Gilded Lily. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city and the tips were usually good, but the customers were often cruel. Her manager, a greedy man named Mr. Henderson, walked into the break room. Elena, why aren't you on the floor? Table 4 is waiting for water. Move it. And try not to waddle so much. You're ruining the aesthetic of the dining room. Elena bit her lip to keep from crying. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. I was just taking a 2-minute sit-down. My feet are very swollen today. Henderson scoffed, looking at her with total disgust. If you can't handle the work, quit. There are 10 girls waiting for your job. But remember, if you quit, you don't get that health insurance bonus next month. Now get out there. Elena took a deep breath, wiped a stray tear from her eye and headed into the dining room. She didn't know that today was the day her life would either shatter or be rebuilt. At 12:15 p.m., Adrian Thorne walked into the Gilded Lily. The hostess looked him up and down. His clothes weren't designer and he didn't look like he belonged in a place where a bottle of wine cost $1,000. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" she asked, her voice tinged with a subtle condescension. "I'm meeting someone later, but I'd like a small table for one for now." "Just some coffee," Adrian said politely. The hostess rolled her eyes and pointed toward a tiny, cramped table near the kitchen door. "You can sit there. It's the only thing available for casual guests." Adrian nodded, thanked her and sat down. He pulled out a book, but his eyes were constantly scanning the room. He saw Elena. He noticed the way she moved, slowly, carefully, her hand often drifting to her lower back. He saw the sweat on her forehead and the way she offered a genuine, kind smile to every customer, even when they ignored her or snapped their fingers at her. "She's exhausted," Adrian thought to himself. "And yet she's the only person in this room who seems real." A few minutes later, Elena approached his table. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I start you with some water or coffee?" Adrian looked up and smiled. "Just a black coffee, please. And take your time. You look like you've had a very long morning." Elena blinked in surprise. Most customers here spoke to her like she was a machine. This man looked at her like she was a person. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It has been a bit busy, but I'm happy to be here." As she walked away to get his coffee, Adrian watched her. She was professional, humble, and clearly in pain. At 12:45 p.m., the front doors of the restaurant swung open. Mr. Sterling arrived. He didn't just walk in, he stormed in. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than Elena's yearly salary. He was shouting into a gold-plated cell phone, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "I don't care what the builders say. Tell them if the project isn't finished by Friday, I'll sue them into the Stone Age. I'm about to sign a $500 million deal with Thorne Global. I don't have time for excuses." Sterling slammed his phone shut and stood in the center of the lobby, waiting for the staff to worship him. The manager, Mr. Henderson, ran over, bowing like a servant. "Mr. Sterling, an honor to have you. Your VIP table is ready. Adrian Thorne hasn't arrived yet, but we have the finest champagne waiting for you." Sterling grunted. "He better be on time. I don't like waiting. And make sure the service is perfect. The last time I was here, the waiter was too slow. If that happens today, I'll make sure this place loses its liquor license." Sterling began walking toward the VIP section, which was located right past Adrian's small table. Adrian kept his head down, appearing to be deeply engrossed in his book. As Sterling passed Adrian, his coat brushed against Adrian's chair. Sterling stopped, looked at Adrian's plain clothes and made a face of pure disgust. "Henderson," Sterling barked loudly. "Since when do you let people like this sit in the main dining area? Smells like poverty over here. Move him to the bar or out to the sidewalk. He's an eyesore for my business meeting." Henderson looked at Adrian, then back at Sterling. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling." "Sir," Henderson turned to Adrian, "I'm going to have to ask you to move. We have a very important guest who requires privacy in this aisle." Adrian didn't look up. "I'm a paying customer and I'm halfway through my coffee. I'm not bothering anyone." Sterling let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "You're bothering me, pal. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm about to handle more money today than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. Henderson, get this trash out of my sight before I decide to take my business lunch somewhere else." Adrian looked up then, his eyes locking onto Sterling's. He saw the arrogance, the cruelty, and the lack of empathy. But he remained calm. "Money doesn't give you the right to be rude, sir. I'm sure Mr. Thorne would agree with that." Sterling leaned down, his face inches from Adrian's. "Don't you dare speak his name. A man like Adrian Thorne wouldn't even breathe the same air as you. Now shut up and move or I'll move you myself." At that exact moment, Elena was coming out of the kitchen. She was carrying a heavy tray with a tureen of hot, creamy seafood bisque, Mr. Sterling's favorite. She was focused on her balance, her breathing heavy. Sterling, still focused on bullying Adrian, stepped backward suddenly to gesture at Henderson. He didn't look. He collided straight into Elena. The impact was sudden. Elena gasped as she lost her footing. The heavy tray tilted and the bowl of hot soup slid off, splashing directly onto the sleeve of Sterling's expensive silk suit and his handmade leather shoes. The restaurant went deathly silent. Elena tumbled to the floor, landing hard on her knees. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, she cried, her voice trembling with terror. She immediately tried to reach for a napkin to clean him, despite the fact that she was the one who had just fallen. Sterling didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't look at her pregnant belly. He looked at his sleeve. His face turned a deep, angry purple. "You stupid, clumsy cow!" Sterling screamed. His voice was so loud it made the glasses on the tables vibrate. He didn't just yell. He reached down, grabbed Elena by the shoulder of her uniform and jerked her upward. "Look at this suit. This suit costs more than your life. You did this on purpose. You're just a lazy, bitter girl trying to ruin my day because you'll never be anything." Elena was sobbing now, clutching her stomach in pain from the fall. "It was an accident, sir. You stepped back into me. Please, I'll pay for the cleaning." "Pay for it?" Sterling sneered. He took his half-full glass of ice water from a nearby table and dumped it over Elena's head. "There. Now you're as wet as my suit. Henderson, fire her. Fire her right now. And I want her escorted out by security. If she isn't out of here in 2 minutes, I'm calling my lawyers to file charges for assault." Henderson didn't hesitate. He wanted to keep Sterling happy at all costs. "Elena, you're done. Get your things and get out. You're a disgrace." Adrian Thorne stood up slowly. The common man mask was starting to slip. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He watched as Elena struggled to stand, her face covered in water and tears, her hand still protectively over her unborn child. But Sterling wasn't finished. As Elena tried to shuffle past him, he stuck out his foot. Elena tripped. She let out a sharp cry as she headed toward the sharp corner of a marble server station. Adrian moved faster than anyone expected. He lunged forward, catching Elena just inches before her head hit the stone. He pulled her into a protective embrace, feeling her whole body shaking with violent sobs. Sterling laughed. "Look at that. 2 losers helping each other. Perfect. Henderson, get the police. I want them both gone." Adrian looked down at Elena. "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" Elena could barely speak. "I think so. But I lost my job. I have nothing now. My mom. The medicine." Adrian stood up, still holding Elena's arm to steady her. He turned to face Sterling. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. "You," Adrian said, his voice low and vibrating with a power that made Sterling stop laughing. "You are the most pathetic excuse for a man I have ever met." Sterling smirked. "And who are you to talk to me? A nobody in a faded shirt? Security. Why are they still here?" Adrian reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a phone and hit a speed dial button. "Marcus," Adrian said into the phone, his eyes never leaving Sterling's. "I'm at the restaurant. Cancel the merger. Tell the board I want a full short on Sterling Industries starting in 5 minutes. Buy up their debt, then call in every loan. I want this man's company dismantled by sunset." Sterling froze. His phone began to ring in his hand. It was his CFO. He ignored it, staring at Adrian. What kind of prank is this? Who do you think you are?" Adrian reached up and smoothed his hair. He stood taller, the authority he had been hiding now radiating off him in waves. "My name is Adrian Thorne," he said clearly. "And I was supposed to be your partner. But I think I'll be your liquidator instead." The entire restaurant gasped. Mr. Henderson, the manager, looked like he was about to faint. Sterling's phone rang again. And again. The color didn't just leave his face, he looked like a ghost. "Adrian? No, Mr. Thorne. I didn't know it was you. You're dressed like. I thought you were. I was just stressed. The deal. We need that deal." Adrian looked at the pregnant waitress, then back at the man who had just humiliated her. "The deal is dead, Sterling. Just like your career." The silence in the restaurant was so thick you could hear the flickering of the candles on the VIP tables. Mr. Sterling's phone was vibrating so violently against his palm it seemed like it might explode. Every vibration represented another board member, another investor, or another bank realizing that their ship was sinking. Sterling's voice was no longer a roar. It was a pathetic, high-pitched whine. Adrian, please. You're a businessman. You know that emotions shouldn't dictate a $500 million merger. I had a bad morning. The stock market is volatile, my wife is divorcing me. I didn't mean it. Adrian Thorne didn't even look at him. He was busy taking his own navy blue polo shirt off, revealing a clean white t-shirt underneath, and using the polo to gently dab the water off Elena's hair and face. You think this is about a bowl of soup, Sterling? Adrian said, his voice as sharp as a razor. It's not. It's about the fact that when you thought I was a nobody, you treated me like trash. And when you saw this woman, a woman carrying a new life, a woman working a double shift to provide, you saw an object. You saw something to step on to make yourself feel taller. Adrian finally turned his head, his eyes cold and dead. I don't do business with people who need to make others feel small to feel big. Marcus is already moving. By the time you get to your office, your keycard won't work. Mr. Henderson, the manager, realized he had hitched his wagon to the wrong horse. He rushed forward, his face twisted into a fake, trembling smile. Mr. Thorne. I am so sorry. I had no idea. Blaine, dear, please, stay. You're not fired. In fact, you're promoted. You can be the floor lead. I'll give you a raise right now. Adrian looked at Henderson with a look of pure loathing. Henderson, keep your mouth shut. You're just as bad as he is. You'd fire a pregnant woman to please a bully? You don't deserve to manage a lemonade stand, let alone a landmark like the Gilded Lily. Adrian turned to Elena. Her eyes were wide, her face pale with shock. Elena, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Please come with me. My car is outside. We're going to the hospital just to make sure you and the baby are okay after that fall. Elena hesitated, looking at the angry, defeated men around her. But, my job. I need the money for my mom's medicine. If I leave now, I won't have anything. Adrian's expression softened. It was the first time a real warm smile touched his face. Elena, you never have to worry about money again. I promise you. On my mother's name, I promise you. As Adrian led Elena toward the door, Sterling tried one last desperate move. He grabbed Adrian's arm. You can't do this. I'll sue you for breach of contract. We had a verbal agreement. Adrian didn't even flinch. He looked down at Sterling's hand on his arm until Sterling slowly, fearfully let go. There was no contract, Sterling. There was only a test. And you failed it before the appetizers even arrived. As they walked out, Adrian pulled his phone out again. Marcus? Who owns the building where the Gilded Lily is located? The Sterling Group? Good. Buy the building. And the restaurant. By tomorrow morning, I want Henderson's termination papers on my desk. And tell the staff they all get a 20% bonus, except for the management. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of justice that the city had never seen. Adrian Thorne didn't just cancel a deal. He unleashed the full power of Thorne Global. Because Mr. Sterling had bragged so loudly about the upcoming merger, his company's stock had been artificially high. The moment the news broke that Adrian Thorne had not only canceled the deal but was actively shorting the stock, the market panicked. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, Sterling Industries had lost 30% of its value. By the next morning, investors were fleeing like rats from a burning ship. Adrian sat in his office, now dressed in his proper billionaire attire, a charcoal gray suit that radiated authority. Marcus stood across from him. It's done, Adrian, Marcus said. Sterling is bankrupt. His board of directors fired him an hour ago. They're facing multiple lawsuits for his previous labor violations that we uncovered during the audit. And Henderson? He was kicked out of the restaurant this morning. He tried to take the contents of the safe with him, but security caught him. He's in custody. Adrian nodded, but his mind wasn't on the money. How is Elena? She's at the private clinic, Marcus replied. The doctors say she's fine. The baby is healthy. The fall didn't cause any permanent damage, but they've put her on bed rest for a week because of the stress. Her mother has been moved to the best respiratory wing in the country. Her treatment is already paid for. Adrian stood up and looked out at the city. He thought about his mother again. He thought about all the times he had watched her cry over a $5 tip that a customer had taken back because the water wasn't cold enough. He couldn't save his mother. She had passed away years ago from the toll of a hard life, but he could save Elena. Adrian arrived at the clinic an hour later. Elena was sitting up in bed looking more rested than she had in years. When she saw Adrian, she tried to stand up, but he rushed forward to stop her. "Please, Elena," said. "You need to rest." Elena looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Mr. Thorne, why? I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody to you. Why would you do all of this? The hospital, my mom's bills, the apartment. Marcus told me you bought us a house near the park." Adrian pulled up a chair and sat beside her. He took her hand, a hand that was calloused from hard work just like his mother's. "When I was 10 years old," Adrian began, his voice thick with emotion, "my mother worked at a diner just like the one you were in. One day a man just like Sterling, spilled coffee on himself. He blamed my mother. He screamed at her, called her names, and made her get on her knees to scrub his shoes. I was sitting in the back booth watching. I was too small to do anything. I promised myself that day that if I ever became powerful, I would never let a man like that win again." Adrian looked into Elena's eyes. "You aren't a nobody, Elena. You are the person I wish had been there to help my mother. You showed kindness to a man in a faded polo shirt when you had nothing yourself. That is true wealth. Everything else, the bank accounts, the buildings, that's just numbers." But Adrian Thorne had one more surprise for Elena. A surprise that would ensure her life was not just comfortable but empowered. "Elena," Adrian said, handing her a leather-bound folder. "Open it." Elena opened the folder. Inside were the deeds to the Gilded Lily. "I bought the restaurant," Adrian said. "But I don't want to run it. I want someone who knows what it's like to be on the floor. I want someone who knows that the most important people in that building are the ones carrying the trays and washing the dishes. I've set up a trust for your baby's education, and the restaurant is yours. You are the new owner. You can hire whoever you want, and you can make sure that no waitress ever has to cry in that break room again." Elena couldn't speak. She just sobbed, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't the sob of a woman who was broken. It was the son of a woman who was finally, for the first time in her life, safe. 2 months later, the Gilded Lily had its grand reopening. The menu was the same, but the atmosphere was completely different. There was no VIP section anymore. Every table was treated with the same respect. Elena stood at the entrance, glowing in a beautiful maternity dress. She wasn't carrying a tray anymore. She was carrying herself with the dignity of a woman who had found her purpose. The staff was happy. They were paid well, they had health insurance, and they knew their boss had their back. In the corner, Adrian Thorne sat at the same small table near the kitchen door. He was wearing his favorite faded navy blue polo shirt. He watched as Elena walked over to a young, nervous-looking girl who had just started her first day as a waitress. Elena leaned in, whispered something encouraging, and patted the girl on the shoulder. Adrian smiled. The test was finally over. And what happened to Mr. Sterling? A few weeks later, a photo went viral on social media. It showed a man in a tattered, once expensive suit, sitting on a park bench eating a cold sandwich. He had lost his mansions, his cars, and his friends. He was invisible now, just like he had tried to make Elena feel. He looked up as a young woman walked by. She was a waitress from a nearby cafe, heading home after her shift. She saw the man looking hungry and tired. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he had once been a billionaire. He just saw a human being in need. She reached into her bag, pulled out an extra apple she had saved from her lunch, and handed it to him with a kind smile. Sterling took the apple, his hands trembling. For the first time in his life, he realized that the thing he had spent his whole life chasing, money, couldn't buy the one thing he finally needed: mercy. Adrian Thorne's story is a reminder to all of us. We live in a world that often measures a person's value by their title, their car, or the size of their house. But true character is revealed when no one is looking, or when you think you're talking to someone who can't do anything for you. Mr. Sterling thought he was the most powerful man in the room because he had a $500 million deal on the table. But Elena was the one with the real power. She had the power of kindness, the power of resilience, and the power of a pure heart. Never look down on someone unless you are reaching down to help them up. Because you never know. The person you are mistreating today might be the one who owns the company you are applying to tomorrow. Or even more importantly, they might be the mirror that shows the world exactly who you really are. Adrian Thorne lost a deal, but he gained a sense of peace he hadn't felt since he was a little boy watching his mother work. He proved that while money can build a hospital, only character can heal a soul. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this emotional journey. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness always wins. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice, karma, and the human spirit. What would you have done if you were Adrian? Would you have given Sterling a second chance, or was he right to take him down? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know whose life you might be changing, or how they might change yours. The end.